Today, what we're going to make are a pair of mid-14th century greaves, based on the effigy of Sir John d'Aubernon the Younger. His father, John d'Aubernon the Elder, also has an effigy, and it's the earliest English brass that survives. The effigy features greaves that are fairly simple, though do have some reasonably advanced features. They're not cased, and they're which is to say they would have a back plate. They're simply front plates, also called shin balls. But they do have more shaping than you find in the earliest of greaves. This greave has been roughed out. In the video you'll see the other one get to roughly the same stage as this one. You can see there's some sweeps to this edge where the straps attach. And you'll also find a strongly dished area here for the calf muscle, a medial ridge that disappears about 3/4 of the way down and tapers into the rest of it, slightly flared edge, and some weak modeling for the ankle. The first step in doing this is making the crease. To make the crease, line up the points of your line with the straight edge of your bighorn, and use your body weight to simply bend the metal. Realizing that your crease isn't going to go all the way down to the end, it's still important to give your metal something to grab hold of. So I have gone ahead and made a rough bend, and now I'm going to use a rawhide mallet to finish it up. Using the rawhide mallet, I've hammered it all along one edge. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to do the same for the other edge. When I'm doing it, I'm not going to let it ride down as far low as it wants to. I want to hold it up so that it actually hits the point of the crease. I'm not going to really sharpen it too much down there because I'm going to be taking it out, but I do want to kind of lightly finish it up. At this point, I have a distinct line. Now I need to tighten it up. I tighten it up with my polished faced hammer. Keeping the hammer face always perfectly parallel to the edge of the metal, I hammer it along. There's a very sharp noise that you hear when you're hitting it right. It's dull or sharp. Dull when I'm hitting it above the metal, and sharp when I hit it on the metal. Always keeping it perfectly parallel. Then flip the piece over and do the same from the other side. And if you do a good job, you can start to bring out a really sharp crease. This is just my first pass, and I've already got most of my crease in it. Okay, I now have a pretty sharp line when viewed from this side, But now this side's a little weak, so I turn it over and I do it again. This time I'm hitting very lightly. I don't really want to wail on it. Not that I was wailing on it before. Control is more important. I do this part, this creasing, before I do the rest of the shaping, because I can get a nice straight crease by doing it over the edge of my bighorn. Otherwise I'd have to freeform it, and that's not easy. And at the same point, it just dies away. Right now there's still this kind of blunt area here, but then it's sharp the rest of the way, all the way up to the top. This is the section we're going to be dishing now. We dish from the inside, face down, on the flat surface of our anvil. Now the greave is laid on the flat surface of the anvil. I'm using a very shallowly dished hammer, and I'm laying it straight on the surface, and I'm just going to hammer it until it does what I want it to do. The important thing at this point for me is to wear hearing protection. Although it will diminish some of my ability to hear what's happening, and I do a lot of armoring by sound, it'll save my ears in the long run. My anvil has a very sharp ring, and I would quickly be deaf if I didn't really guard my hearing pretty well. I'm wearing a glove on my left hand and a set of hearing protectors. It's important to realize that all the dishing I'm going to do is going to be delivered straight into the anvil. Lots of noise. But what it'll also do is actually stretch the metal and force it to deform into a very curved pattern. No dish is required. Here we go. At this point, I have worked a small, at this point almost rectangular area, but I started off in a circle right here in the medius point of the calf, roughly in line with this upper circle, this upper hole for the strap. All I've done is hammered on the flat surface, and you can already see that it's started to form. Started to take on some surface. It's got some depth. It's already starting to curve in this direction, just like it's supposed to do. About a few thousand more hits and we'll be set to go. I want to be very thorough and very careful to make sure I'm hitting every spot. I don't want to leave a lot of spots like this one where I've really kind of missed. I want to get it all. You don't have to hit very hard. if you want to put more depth in, once you've started stretching the part, you can pull it away from the surface of the anvil. Start pushing down towards the anvil. Pull it away from the anvil and you'll start to curve it. You can see the curve that this piece has already started to get. I'm only going to dish it down to roughly this area, roughly down to the lower set of holes. And then this area is going to come in this direction, whereas this stuff goes in the other direction. Now it's time to dish some more. When I initially started dishing, I was dishing in a circle. Now I'm doing more back and forth down here. I'm more concerned with putting a more tubular curve in than so much of a dish. I'm being very careful as I work this area right up to the crease. I don't want to erase my crease, and I know I'm not going to be able to get right up to it with this hammer. There'll be this kind of swale in here, but I can live with that because I'm going to go after it with another hammer. Alright, at this point, I've got some nice shape going in this direction and some nice shape going in this direction. Really starting to do what I want to do. I do want to put some more depth in so it's closer to the other one, which is roughed out. It's got a lot more depth in through here. But you can start to see some of the similarities between the two pieces. In order to put more depth in, you just need to hammer more. At this point I'm starting to get a real curve in here, perhaps more than I want, but that's okay. Because as I work the whole piece, it'll start to straighten out. Now I could do the opposite here and hammer on this side to cause it to go in, which would do it. But on the flat surface of the anvil, it would be rather awkward because we're starting to see that this part wants to stick up, whereas this part would be down. So that's not a really good option. I'll work on it once I've had more chances to work on this area. For this area, I just want to be thorough. At this point, I think I'm ready to do a little bit of light planishing, but I could also bring in some of this, and I'll do that over a more tubular stake. The next step is to planish it, just using a regular ball stake. Steel-faced hammer that's nice and polished. It's got a bit of schmutz on it, it's just polishing compound. And I hit straight down onto the ball to even out the surfaces. I'm essentially hammering out hammer marks. Always parallel, always in the same place, and moving the piece, not the hammer. You'll notice that I didn't go all the way out to the edges. I can do that forming in the planishing stage. I do it carefully. It's important to have good light when you're doing your planishing. The reason for that is you're starting to look for spots that are getting smooth and shiny. I have been known to use a magic marker and cover over areas if I'm really not sure about them, because you can really see what shows up with hammer marks in that direction. You can also just kind of smudge it up with your fingers. Wherever you hit will become shiny. Thousand more hours of this and I'll be done. At this point I've been planishing for a while and I've got a pretty smooth surface, but I do have some spots that are kind of stubborn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the spots that look particularly bad, and I'm going to highlight them with a magic marker so I can see what I'm doing. I'm just looking for the ones that don't quite look right. And I'm ready to start again. Still more planishing to go. In a lot of ways, this is one of my least favorite parts of armoring, but it's absolutely necessary to getting a good finished product. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's the secret to good armor. Not really a secret. If you get a spot like this one right here, that's stubborn, it probably means it's extra high or extra low. If it's extra high, you just smack it down, but if it's extra low, you kind of have to work your way around it to bring it up. You want to be careful not to hit too hard, because in the process you can put in more facets than you're taking out. Well, I'm going to keep planishing for another hour and see where I am when I've got it done. By the way, you'll notice it's not symmetrical. I've only really dished here. This part is just barely dished, and mostly it's just curved. The curve goes this direction. There's very little in this direction. At this point, it's pretty well planished in this area. So my next step is to take and work on this area where it's flat. Just with some gentle curving with a rawhide mallet, and then I'll come back and I'll bring this section in. The next step is to round this in over the big hole. I'm just sort of starting to round it a little bit. I'm using a little body weight to see what I can do. And I just bent it, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to take that out. I'm going to do that on the anvil. The next step is to undo some of the damage I did. I just made a kind of a W. So I go back to my same hammer, or one similar to it. This one is just sort of a smaller version of it. And keeping everything perfectly flush, I lightly hammer it out. I'm really only working in this swale. I'm hammering extremely light. Now I'm working the other side. I'm going to pull up a chair and do some of the work right down on it. So I'm looking at it. I'm using two different sides of this hammer. One side's very narrow, one side's a little wider. I'm using the narrow side to get right up to the crease. Using the wider side to kind of blend it in. I'm going to do very much the same operation in here, but mostly I'm going to do that by very lightly planishing it. Even though I'm not putting a lot of hammer marks in, not putting many hammer marks in, I am going to wind up putting some in. They're going to have to be planished out. And in the process of planishing this, I'm going to wind up giving it some of its characteristic shape. What I'm doing is I'm hammer walking. I'm doing this operation. This hammer walking operation is giving this a very slight curve and a very tiny curve in this direction. Now I've given it a little bit of curve. I've got lots of hammer marks here. I'm going to go back to planishing. At this point I'm doing my planishing over a kind of a tube stake. I can, if I need a rounded spot, use the rounded ball end of it. But mostly I'm just going to hammer on it in that area. I'll be very careful because I have a couple of nicks in here and I don't want it to show up. Well, I just need to do this for, I don't know, a few more days. At this point it's roughly planished in, and now I'm just going to start to bring this all around. Getting rid of the crease right in here. Bringing this part around. Everything I can along that direction. It's basically got the shape it's going to have. Now it's just a matter of fine-tuning it and refining it. At this point, I'm ready to start moving the metal a little bit around here. At this point, it's starting to really come along. Getting some of that shape that I want in here. stink around some more and I'll be doing a pretty good job, I think. Now I do a little bit of planishing this way. Over the ball stake. I use this planishing operation to really bring this in. Using a very straight, flat-faced hammer, just bringing the whole area right up to the crease, all the way. I'm using a lot of hits, but they're all very light. At this point, it's time to flare the edge. I've roughly marked out with a marker where I want it flared and how deeply. Do it over the round portion with a cross peen. You're just barely, first pass is just bending it out. See that hammer mark I left right there? You don't want to leave any hammer marks if you can help it in these early passes. As you're doing it, this is going to have a tendency to open up, so you might need to occasionally squeeze it closed. If you do it this way and then this way, you'll tend to keep it more closed than if you worked this way. key is, in each pass, to move it slightly further along. And you want to kind of keep it unsupported. If you hear that really sharp sound, you are thinning the metal, which is part of what you're trying to do here. But you're also trying to stretch it by bending it over the open portion. A little valley that it's hanging over. You especially don't want to have any really sharp sounds near the edge. Starting to do what it's supposed to do. That is to say, flaring outward, and that's what you want. This has a wider and a sharper face. Right in the center here, I'm using the sharper face because I want to stretch it a little more. I'm purposely trying to thin the metal a little, because by thinning it, you're forcing it to go somewhere, and that would mean flaring out. The flare in this area here, kind of towards the ankle region, is very shallow, whereas the flare in the center is pretty pronounced. So at this point I just want to kind of return it to its proper state. Maybe it's time to do some modeling in this ankle region. I've got my flare going. In my stump, I have a depression that very closely matches the nylon face of this hammer. I put it in where I want it to be. Just hammer it home. That's all there is to getting some very shallow, simple, weak modeling in this area. At this point, we've pretty well got them to match. There's some slight tweaking that needs to be done, some dinking around, but basically they're ready to be ground and polished and strapped.